Reports of violent hauntings have been pouring in from this one particular abandoned house. Locals have claimed to be scratched, pushed, and even pulled by an unseen force. Naturally, a team of paranormal investigators decided to take on the challenge, hoping to capture definitive proof of the afterlife. Little did they know, they were about to get more than they bargained for. They arrived at the dilapidated two-story home just as dusk settled, casting long, eerie shadows across the overgrown yard. The air was heavy, still, and a sense of foreboding hung over the property. As they stepped inside, the temperature seemed to drop, and the silence was almost deafening. This was a place where something terrible had happened, and its memory was etched into the very walls. The team, composed of 4 experienced investigators, Mark, Sarah, Ben, and Chloe, began their setup. They were methodical, placing high-definition night vision cameras in every room, from the decaying living area to the dusty, cobweb-filled attic. EMF detectors, which measure electromagnetic fields often associated with paranormal activity, were scattered throughout the house. Digital audio recorders were left running, hoping to capture electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs, disembodied voices not audible to the human ear. They also set up a command center in the main hallway, a hub of monitors displaying live feeds from all the cameras. With everything in place, they turned off their flashlights, plunging the house into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of their equipment. The vigil had begun. For the first few hours, the house remained quiet. The team conducted several EVP sessions, asking questions into the darkness, hoping for a response. "Is anyone here with us?" Mark asked, his voice echoing in the silence. "Can you give us a sign of your presence?" Nothing. The only sounds were the creaking of the old house settling and the distant hum of their own equipment. A sense of disappointment started to creep in. Maybe the stories were just that story. Maybe it was all just a local legend, fueled by the building's creepy appearance. But just as they were about to take a break, something changed. The air grew thick and heavy, and a sudden, bone-chilling cold swept through the hallway. It was a dramatic temperature drop, far beyond any natural draft. Simultaneously, the EMF detectors placed in the living room began to scream. Their needles shot into the red zone, beeping erratically and uncontrollably. Mark and Sarah rushed into the room, their own handheld meters confirming the massive spike in energy. It was as if a power source had been switched on somewhere inside the house. And then it started. A wooden chair in the corner of the room slid a few inches across the floor. It wasn't a gentle nudge. It was a deliberate, sharp movement. Everyone froze, their eyes locked on the chair. The cameras were rolling, capturing everything. "Did you see that?" Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, a door at the far end of the hallway slammed shut with a deafening bang that reverberated through the entire house. There was no wind, no draft. It was impossible. The activity escalated rapidly. A heavy oak table in the center of the living room began to shake, first gently, then with increasing violence. It was as if an invisible giant was trying to flip it over. The team backed away, their initial excitement turning into genuine fear. This wasn't a subtle haunting. This was a direct and aggressive display of power. They were no longer just observers. They were participants in whatever was unfolding. The energy in the room was palpable, a buzzing, hostile presence that seemed to be closing in on them. They were witnessing what the locals had described, but experiencing it firsthand was a whole different level of terror. The house was awake, and it was not happy they were there. The real horror began when the entity turned its attention directly to the team. Ben, who was filming the shaking table from across the room, was suddenly thrown backward. It wasn't a trip or a stumble. It was so hit hard by an invisible force, landing on the floor several feet away. He gasped for air, his face pale with shock and pain. "Something pushed me," he yelled, scrambling to his feet. The others rushed to his side, but before they could even process what had happened, Chloe let out a scream. She clutched at her shoulders, her eyes wide with terror. "It's touching me. It has its hands on me," she cried out. Mark shone a flashlight on her, and they all watched in disbelief. She was standing in the middle of the room, far from anyone else, yet she was flinching as if someone was physically grabbing her. Then, something happened that chilled them to the bone. As Chloe continued to cry out, Red lines began to appear on the skin of her back, visible through a thin shirt. Mart carefully lifted the fabric to get a clearer look. There, appearing in real time, were 3 long, angry red scratch marks, as if a clawed hand had raked across her skin. They were deep, and they were fresh. The cameras captured the entire horrifying event. The invisible assault, Chloe's terror, and the physical evidence materializing out of thin air. This was no longer just an investigation. This was an attack. The entity wasn't just trying to scare them. It was trying to harm them. The team was in real, physical danger. The atmosphere became chaotic. The EMF meters were still going wild, their beeping a frantic soundtrack to the unfolding terror. Shadowy figures began to flicker in the peripheries of their vision, darting across the walls just too quickly to be seen clearly. They were large, man-shaped silhouettes that seemed to have no source. The team's flashlights would cut through the darkness, only to reveal nothing there. But the most unsettling thing was the sound. They started to hear footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps circling them in the darkness. They came from all directions, sometimes sounding like they were right behind them, other times on the floor above. Yet every time they turned, there was no one there. Then, from an empty corner of the room, a low, guttural growl echoed through the space. It was a deep, menacing sound. Not human and not animal. It was a sound of pure malice, and it seemed to vibrate through their very bones. The growl was followed by a series of loud bangs on the walls around them, as if a giant fist was pounding on the plaster. The entire house seemed to be in an uproar, possessed by a violent and hateful energy that was focused entirely on them. They were trapped, surrounded by a force that was growing more aggressive and more powerful with every passing second. The friendly questions and scientific curiosity were long gone, replaced by a primal need to survive. Mark, the team leader, made the call. "We're done. Everybody out. Now." There was no arguing. The investigation was over. This entity was too powerful, too violent. Staying any longer was risking serious injury, or worse. They grabbed the most essential pieces of equipment and made a break for the front door, not daring to look behind them. The sounds of slamming doors, growling, and pounding followed them all the way out. As they burst out into the cool night air, gasping for breath, the house behind them fell silent. The oppressive energy vanished as if it had never been there. Looking back at the dark, silent structure, it was hard to believe what they had just experienced inside. They had captured what they came for, clear, undeniable evidence of the paranormal, but it had come at a terrifying cost. Days later, back in the safety of their studio, the team began the painstaking process of reviewing the hours of footage and audio. The evidence was even more shocking than they remembered. The cameras had captured everything. The chair sliding, the door slamming, the tables shaking violently. The footage of Ben being pushed was crystal clear, showing an unseen force propel him across the room. Chloe's scratches appearing on her skin were captured in horrifying high-definition detail. The audio recorders picked up the disembodied growls and the terrifying footsteps that had circled them. It was a paranormal investigator's goldmine, but as they synced the footage from all the different cameras, they discovered something they had missed during the chaos. As they watched the footage from the command center monitors, they noticed a recurring anomaly. In the corners of the screens, just at the edge of the frame, a tall, distorted shadow could be seen. It wasn't there constantly, but it would appear and disappear throughout the night. It moved from room to room, always staying just out of their direct line of sight. When they were in the living room, the shadow was lurking in the hallway camera. When they moved to the hallway, it was visible in the kitchen feed. It had been with them the entire time. It wasn't just in one room, reacting to their presence. It was intelligently and deliberately following them, stalking them through the house like a predator. The realization sent a new wave of fear through the team. The entity hadn't just been attacking them. It had been hunting them. The footage they had was groundbreaking, but it also served as a chilling reminder that when you go looking for the dark, sometimes the dark looks right back at you. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more terrifying, true paranormal encounters. And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss an update. Stay safe out there.